Today on Between the Lines, a major voice in American news and culture, Arianna Huffington. Welcome, I'm Barry Kibrick. Arianna is the co-founder, president, and editor-in-chief of the Huffington Post. Her financial success and power made it seem like Arianna had it all. But there's another side to her story. With her deeply personal book, Thrive, she candidly opens up about her own issues and why redefining success is a must in order for us to create a life of well-being, wisdom, and wonder.
I'm a writer today because I was a reader when I was 11 years old, and it was...
You do not need to prove your state of happiness to anybody.
Most of these speeches were as much as a month in preparation.
Characters, the heroes in this book, are seekers of truth in a story that involves a lot of
I
corruption.
don't get a chance to really talk about what's real, and this is the first for me.
Arianna, it is a true pleasure having you on the show. As you can tell from everybody's excitement here, welcome to Between the Lines.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
You know, Arianna, your book begins in the way I would never have expected it to begin. I was lying on the floor of my home office in a pool of blood. And, you know, at first when I was looking at this, I said, Arianna, how could she have any issues? What is this about? And it's amazing how many issues, even when you think you've reached a sort of pinnacle of success, one will always have to deal with. And that's what this is all about.
Absolutely. And that was like my wake-up call that prompted me to write the book. It happened 7 years ago, 2 years after we launched the Huffington Post. And I was working 18-hour days, getting investment for the Huffington Post, getting our editorial policy going. At the same time, I had 2 daughters, one of whom was ready to start going on the college tour to decide what college she was going to go to. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I collapsed from burnout, sleep deprivation, and exhaustion. I hit my head on my desk, broke my cheekbone, got 4 stitches on my right eye. And as I came to in a pool of blood, I started asking a lot of the questions that we often stop asking after we leave college, like what is a good life, what is success? And while by conventional definitions of success I was successful, by any sane definition of success, if you're lying in a pool of blood on the floor of your office and nobody has shot you, you're not successful.
Well, that's what this book's about. It's redefining how the world needs to look at success, because if we don't, we're going to fall. I mean, let's face it, we'd all wish we could be as successful and as wealthy as Arianna Huffington. But when you read this, you realize that that's not what is really the most important thing. And you're the one that's making that realization. And when it's coming from you, it hits us in a very different way, because we're saying, oh my gosh, we really better follow this, because these are the kinds of successes that are good for the soul.
Exactly. And wherever we are in life, whether we are at the top of the world or struggling to put food on the table, the principles that I write about in Thrive apply, because it's basically about looking at life in a larger perspective than just the 2 dimensions, the 2 metrics that the world uses to define success, which is really money and power, which is like trying to sit on a 2-legged stool. Sooner or later you topple over. And that's why we need that 3rd metric, that 3rd leg of the stool that I say in the book consists of these 4 pillars: well-being, wisdom, wonder, and giving.
And I'm going to take them in that order, if that's okay. I want to start with well-being, because you are the first person I've seen to define it this way. When we include our own well-being in our definition of success, another thing that changes is our relationship with time. I have this thing with time. My son, in fact, who's normally with us, is not feeling well and he's out today, but he knows it drives him crazy because I could write almost every blog on time. How did you make that association that when we get this centered well-being feeling, even our relationship with time changes?
Because what I found changed is that instead of leading life in a breathless way, always feeling that it's later than we thought, always feeling that
I don't mean to laugh. I could write the book on always feeling that it's too late.
Yes.
Am I right?
Exactly. Always feeling overwhelmed by everything that's coming at us. We find that place in us, that centered place, where we can handle anything. And that's a function of how renewed, recharged, and connected with ourselves we are.
One of the things that you make clear is we all have a purpose. And that sometimes we forget because it's hidden from us. That's if there's something I'd love to do would be to open up the door of everyone's lives so that they could see their purpose, because every single one of us has one.
Absolutely, and I think every single incident in our lives has a purpose too. A lot of the heartbreaks, the painful things that happen have a purpose. It's a hidden purpose. It's often a hidden blessing that we are not aware of as we're experiencing it, but often when we look back, we can see the purpose in the heartbreaks and the painful experiences.
And you know, you use the word oftentimes, mindfulness, but you do it with a very unique twist. You say that when we hear the word mindfulness, we have to inwardly hear the word heartfulness. They can't really be separated. Otherwise, we're only using one side of our limbic or left side, right side brain. But when you put those two things together, that heart and mind, that's when you can feel the stuff at the cellular level, in the soul.
Because that's really what completes us. It's not just the mind, it's the mind and the heart. And that's when we become connected to our own wisdom. And what's happening now, because of our hyperconnectivity to technology, it's often harder to disconnect from all the distractions around us and reconnect with ourselves. But every religion, every philosophy, many scientists have written about that center in us. The Bible calls it the kingdom of God is within. Archimedes, my compatriot, Greek scientist, said, give me a place to stand and I can move the world. So we all have that place. We've all had glimpses of that place. Most of the time we don't live there. So the question is, how quickly can we veer back to that place from which everything is possible?
One of the key ways is through our own breath. And you said something that took my breath away when you said, we think of ourselves as breathing, but in reality, we are being breathed. We are, well, you literally say, our breath is sacred.
Yes, because if you think of it, we're not really consciously breathing. I mean, you and I are talking, we're not thinking about breathing now. For me, my breath has become a little bit of a thread through the labyrinth that can help me return to the center. So during the day, if I'm feeling stressed, if I'm worried about anything, if I'm feeling rushed, I can just take 10, 20 seconds and focus on the inhalation and exhalation of my breath. And it has an incredibly centering effect. And as you know, the book is full of little tips and tools that we can use, because my hope is that it's not going to be just something with which the reader can agree, but something that we can implement in small steps in our lives.
But it's also not, in the classic sense, a self-help book, which is what I enjoyed about it. It really makes you think about these things. They're not so much, they are tips, but they're not so much answers as they are awakenings, so that you have to really look at what is written and then bring it within yourself.
Yes, because I wanted to bring together like 3 strands. One is my own personal journey, because that's the narrative, there's a storyline. The other is the amazing scientific findings in recent years that validate ancient wisdom about the importance of sleep, of pauses in our lives, of meditation. And that is very significant to me, because even the most stubborn skeptic can go through my 55 pages of scientific endnotes and discover that there is truth in this way of living as opposed to the way we have been leading our lives.
There is one truth that I bolded so large it almost takes up this entire space on my tablet here, and it's a theme of my show actually that you wrote about, and it was this: have patience with all things, but chiefly have patience with yourself. That if I have an Achilles tendon, going back to one of your people again from Greece, I love how you do that. Every time you quote a Greek philosopher, they're like
One
your
of
brother
my
or your
people,
sisters.
yeah.
You know, I wrote down Arianna's peeps, but that is the hardest thing to do. Is to have patience with yourself, because once you get aggravated at yourself, that's when you start that downward cycling, that inward loop in the brain that doesn't allow you to see clearly the beauty around you. So you must forget about having patience with everyone else. First have patience with yourself, because you're going to keep failing and failing no matter how many times you try. And yet if you have that patience, you will keep going and going and going.
Absolutely, because ultimately it's about getting up one more time than we fall down in any respect, including our own spiritual evolution. And you're absolutely right that the little steps that I recommend in the book are in the context of living our lives with a greater sense of meaning and purpose and well-being, and more connected to our own wisdom, because you look around and you see an enormous amount of leaders who have high IQs and great degrees making terrible decisions. It's not that they're not smart, but they are not wise. And what we need more than anything, as we're drowning in data at the moment, is wisdom.
Well, you say, though, that wisdom, true wisdom, is about recognizing what we're really seeking, and that is connections and love. That is what separates knowledge and brains and smart political leaders who are doing bad, is they're not connecting with A, their people, and B, with love.
Yes, well, ultimately, of course, love is what fulfills us. And we see that in modern scientific findings, from the University of Wisconsin, for example, neuroscientist Richard Davidson has done a lot of work with Buddhist monks, examining their brains, and has come to the conclusion that happiness is a skill we can learn, and love is a shortcut to happiness, and so is giving. Giving is a shortcut to happiness, and our genes are wired for giving, so we are rewarded when we're actually engaged in giving.
And giving's it's kind of funny, in your 4 pillars, you have giving really at the end, which I'll get to. But I want to hit wisdom a little bit more, and then where I'm really going to fly is on wonder, because I found that to be so exciting. But here's the thing that I thought was interesting, was that the wisdom of slowing down, which is part of the way to achieve that connectivity and that love, it itself is a journey, and it's a hard journey, and people have to realize this, that even though they're learning these words, learning these tips, these are hard things to really imbibe within oneself.
Yes, because the world keeps sending us contradictory signals. The world is constantly pushing us to climb the ladder faster, to focus on the first 2 metrics of money and power. And that's why one of my favorite quotes in the book is from Ian Thomas, who said, every day the world will grab you by the hand and tell you this is important, and this is important, and this is important, and you must worry about this, and you must worry about that, and you must yank your hand back and put it on your heart and say, no, this is important.
But it's funny you should say the world, because my next line was just the opposite of the world, and it was this, what you said: evict the obnoxious roommate in your own head. I think that's where the problem really lies, because I've been having, like you, this obnoxious roommate in my and I can't. And you know what I liked about what you do is we know we can't eliminate these things, but like you say, what we can do is we can make the time they stay in our head shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, so we don't necessarily feel it all the time.
Yes, and make the voice less and less and less loud. And I feel that obnoxious roommate, the voice of self-doubt, the voice of self-judgment, is more draining than anything we can be doing. And so when we learn to separate ourselves from that voice, when we learn that that voice is not the truth, an enormous amount of energy is released.
Well, you even say even our own worst enemies don't talk to us as bad as the voice, and that's the absolute truth. When I have that negative space going, I'm feeling thoughts that I know my worst enemy doesn't feel as bad about me as I do at that time. Isn't that? It's a
Yes.
funny kind of state to be in.
Don't you wish that we could have a little tape recorder we can attach to our brain that would record everything the obnoxious roommate says, and then we would be stunned by how mean and untruthful that voice is.
That's the key. It's the untruthfulness. That is where my wife comes in and rescues me every day.
You're very lucky.
Oh man, if I didn't have her, all I would have is is that nasty roommate. But I've got this beautiful wife who tells me that other element of me that I'm not seeing.
Right. Exactly, because the truth is that we are both. Everybody is a mixture. And I have a Cherokee saying in the book about which side will prevail, you know, our better angels or the obnoxious roommate, depends on which we're feeding. Where is our energy going? And which one do we prioritize?
The other thing you say, though, if you really want to help keep that roommate out of your head, humor. I find that whoever brings up humor in anything, whether it's film, literature, books, humor is truly one of the things that can penetrate through all that crap that goes on.
Yes, because humor is a great way to bring perspective to everything. And I think often what causes so much pain in our lives is lack of perspective, is sweating the small stuff, magnifying little things until they become incredibly worrisome.
I said wisdom was one of my favorites, but it is wonder. It is wonder. Those are the 3 W's. It's the well-being that we talked about, it's the wisdom, and it's the wonder. And wonder seems to be the true core to how we are going to live our lives. If we live it with wonder, we will always be in a very gentle spot. If we don't live it with that wonder, it is as if we are robbing ourselves of our most precious gift.
Because wonder is really what connects us to the mystery of life. And if we rob ourselves of that, our life can shrink down to our to-do list. It can become about our next project. It can become just about what we want to achieve, which is all very important. I mean, I'm completely in favor of big dreams, accomplishments. The question is, are we shrinking our whole life to that and putting our experience of life on hold until we accomplish something? Or are we also enjoying the journey and experiencing the wonder along the way?
Well, the way you put enjoying the journey, I'd like to say it's actually, if you look at it, as you say, it's moving from struggle to grace. That is the way to enjoy the journey. And part of that, you say, is learning how to be vulnerable. And here again is that part. It's to be able to accept ourselves without judgment and shame. So that's, besides having the roommate we have to deal with, it's ourselves that we have to forgive ourselves even if we make a mistake,
right,
and don't look at it with shame. That's also, because the shame is what I find is the spiraling effect. That's what spirals things down. Once you feel shame, not responsibility, If
Yeah.
you feel responsibility and say, wait a minute, I did something, I can fix it, I can solve it, I find that that doesn't bother me, at least personally, as much as when I feel shame.
Shame, yes, because then we just identify ourselves with that mistake or that thing we blame ourselves for. And we forget that, yes, we make mistakes, but we are also a unique human being, each one of us, of infinite possibilities. And keeping that in mind, even during dark moments, is a great way to free ourselves from whatever the obnoxious roommate may be saying.
Well, before we leave even Wonder, the thing though that I think does it best, and I know you think so because you're the one that wrote it, gratitude. Gratitude is living in a state of gratitude, and that is the gateway to the grace. So even whatever your situation is, and again, I want, I don't want people to think that it's, well, it's easy for Arianna Huffington to be thankful. I mean, she has a successful but you're letting us know that that's not what you're thankful for.
No.
What you're thankful for is always waking up and being grateful that you can experience the wonder, which we all can do.
Absolutely, and that's why in the book I even include people in concentration camps, like Viktor Frankl, who wrote about his experience in a concentration camp, because he basically said that wherever we are, in the most extreme circumstances, we have the freedom to choose our own attitude. And it is true, and we have the data, the scientific data to prove it, that people respond to bad things happening in very different ways. If we only value money and power, we'll never have enough. And also, we will make decisions which are often based on fear, because we're afraid that we're going to lose something which we feel defines us. We see that with politicians. We see how often politicians cast votes which are not in the public interest, which are not what they believe, because they have so identified with their job, being a senator or a member of Congress, that they feel casting a vote that endangers that re-election could endanger themselves, their own identity.
Well, that's why it's important now that we get to the fourth pillar of giving, because it leads into that in a moment, and I'll show you how you did it if you don't remember. But it's the willingness to give of ourselves. But more importantly, I was prompted by these words: our empathy and our compassion. Whether we give money, if we just give our compassion and feel the empathy, man, that's giving more than anyone really could hope for.
Yes, and it starts in very small ways every day. My mother, to whom the book is dedicated, was an example of the giving that I write about in the book, because my sister and I grew up in a one-room apartment in Athens without any money, but my mother never made us feel that we're just limited by our circumstances, and she always made us feel that we could give to others even when we didn't have money to give. And for her, it was like giving of ourselves. And she could never have an impersonal relationship with anyone. So whether she was shopping in a grocery store or seeing someone in the street, she would make a connection. And that was really what I think we can start doing as a way of giving. The checkout clerk in the grocery store, the barista in the coffee shop, the cleaning crew in our office, making personal connections is the beginning of recognizing that common humanity.
And you emphasize it by saying we cannot wait for the leader on the white horse to do that. We have to look into the mirror to find that.
Yes, because we all have that capacity in us. And although government has big responsibilities, we cannot delegate all our compassion to government.
Arianna, you are a joy to talk to, but our time is up. And I'm going to end with your words, and I think you mentioned it earlier. Life is shaped from the inside out. Thank you for reinforcing that universal truth to us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for joining us. Now, before Arianna leaves, I'd like to leave you with these few more words from Thrive. There's a collective longing to stop living in the shallows, to stop hurting our health and our relationships by striving so relentlessly after success as the world defines it, and instead tap into the riches of the joy and the amazement of the possibilities that all our lives embody. I'm Barry Kibrick. Between the world's definition of success and what truly is success is where you'll tap into the riches and amazing possibilities of true joy. Thank you so much, Arianna.
Thank you so much.
It's
Thank
my
you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Closed captioning is made possible by MavenLink, business without boundaries, leveling the playing field for service businesses with enterprise-grade growth management software, and the expertise to empower companies worldwide to work faster and smarter. Learn more at mavenlink.com. To connect with Barry, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Barry Kibrick. And to contact Barry directly, watch past episodes of Between the Lines, and read his blog, visit us at barrykibrick.com.